Yeah, I mean, my answer might change by the month, but my current obsession is with Martin Shkreli. I think this guy is seriously underrated. And the way this all started was it was only a couple weeks ago. I was on vacation with my in-laws, and I try to kind of check out of work when I'm on vacation, but at night, when my wife is asleep, I like poking around the internet for whatever. It's kind of always been one of my pastimes, and I somehow got connected with a YouTube channel called Best of Martin Shkreli, and it's basically clips of his live streams, which he used to do around. I think it was before he blew up, and most people will remember. Maybe if there's anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, he's also known as the Pharma Bro. He had this kind of momentary rise to fame a few years back, where he basically, what most people know him as was a pharmaceutical guy who has a pharmaceutical company who jacked up the prices on certain prescription pills for life-saving, medicines. That's pretty much what everyone knows him as, aka the Pharma Bro. And probably second most well-known aspect of him is he bought this rare Wu-Tang album, and he's the sole owner of this of a particular Wu-Tang album that the world has never heard. It's in his sole possession, and he's a bit of a troll. He likes to, kind of, play up these things. Anyway, so that's the public image.
He's still in jail. He's still in jail, though, right?
And and he's in jail. By the way, yeah. And so, if you want, we can go deep on this. I basically have learned everything about him. I could explain the case and like why I think it's political and all of that. But I just wanted to give I wanted to give listeners the background in case they don't know who we're talking about. And so, just to finish my story real quick, that's all I knew about him as well. That was basically the mental model I had of him. That he was basically kind of a sketchy, probably kind of a crook, and kind of an asshole who was just a bit of a troll and egotistical and narcissistic. That was all I knew about him, what most people know about him or think about him. And then I found this YouTube channel called Best of Martin Shkreli, and it's clips of, apparently, I did not know, he was like an OG live streamer who did like live streams all the time for over the course of like a year or two, or maybe more. I'm not even sure how long. And basically, there's hours and hours and hours of content that he produced on like YouTube, or I think at the time the big platform was Blab. Do you remember Blab? It was like a short-lived thing. I think it got acquired by Twitch. In any event, so he has this massive body of like of work, if you want to call it that, of his ideas and teachings and attitudes, and people it was a call-in show mostly. People would call in and ask him all kinds of questions. Like people would ask him everything under the sun, and someone went and basically clipped the most interesting bits from these hours and hours of live streams that he did. And this is the channel, the Best of Martin Shkreli channel. And I listened to like, I think almost every video on there over the course of my like 1 week vacation with my in-laws. And he's really smart. He's really, really smart. He's really, really smart. I also think he's actually a good, he's a bit egotistical, perhaps a bit narcissistic. But, everyone has their vices. Everyone has their pitfalls. I think he's actually really smart and actually is generally pro-social. Like, I think he's deeply motivated by helping people who are suffering. His interest in drug development is not only like extremely impressive, what he's done from a very early age, the companies he's built and how he's built them. But I do think he's deeply and genuinely motivated to save lives. And I think the negative flack he received for, so-called like, price gouging is completely misunderstood. And he explains it in very convincing and very clear detail that I don't think he ever really did anything wrong. So free Shkreli.
That might happen. The impetus to make that happen might begin right here.
There you go.
As a quick introduction to his body of work, I'm wondering if maybe you can present him as a mashup. Like Martin Shkreli is the intellectual love child of like, I don't know, Taleb and Jordan Peterson or something like that. Like who does he remind you of that people will know already?
That's a good question. Well, one thing that I didn't realize about him until I really went deep down this rabbit hole was he's really primarily an entrepreneur. And so he should really be thought of as a founder and as someone who makes bold economic bets and then organizes capital and resources and executes on big bets. So he first made a name for himself actually in hedge funds. He worked for like Jim Cramer and had a few big successful deals. And that's kind of where he got his first social and economic capital and relationships and investors from. And then basically he was doing hedge fund stuff around pharmaceutical industry, and then realized, he actually saw some opportunities. And I don't know if people understand the markets for rare drugs, rare diseases. That's kind of his specialty. But basically, there are many diseases out there where only like maybe a few thousand people ever get this disease, but it's life-threatening and it can kill these 1,000 people. Well, the economics for that kind of disease are very difficult, because if there's only 1,000 people, but it's a really, really urgent problem for them, how do you actually make it profitable or sustainable? How do you make it at all economically possible to do the research that's required to find the cure or find the solution, find some kind of treatment, and then also the extremely expensive process of clinical trials and bringing it to market? Well, as he explains, the only way you can possibly do it is by having relatively high prices for those treatments. And it's really not as antisocial as people think, because the only people who pay for these things are insurance companies. And he says himself, he's very clear. He's very clear that if you're actually an individual who doesn't have access to insurance and you need this life-saving treatment that only like 1,000 people in the world need, you can just ask him for it. You can ask his company for it. You can like email them and they'll just give it to you for free. And he's done that many times. And so it's like just a complete media psyop, basically, from kind of stupid people and journalists who have too much time on their hands. But I'm kind of getting away from your question, which was like, how should people see him? Yeah, more through the entrepreneur/founder frame. So, if people want like, a kind of public image that they could maybe associate it with. I mean, people will say this is like absolutely ridiculous, but I don't know, something like he put him more in the camp of like a Steve Jobs or like a Mark Zuckerberg for pharmaceuticals. Or maybe a better would be like people have seen like The Big Short. People will know like Michael Burry's character played by what was his name?
Christian Bale.
Yeah, by Christian Bale. So that might be a little bit more sensible, like a kind of a guy deep in the trenches of hedge funds and big businesses, making a kind of unpopular, weird, bold bet and then betting big on it. That's probably like a better kind of mental frame for understanding him.
Cool. I'd like to follow up on some things that you said there, James, if you don't mind. Given that he explains all of this rationale clearly and the economics are there, as someone who knows nothing, I'm interested in your opinion on why he really went to jail. Like, did the media mob influence the judicial process? Is there some like sneaky dark motive that someone would want him in jail? Like, what happened here?
Yeah. So basically, I do believe that it's essentially his sentencing and the way it all played out, turning out pretty bad for him, was overwhelmingly due to political forces, I do believe. So what happened was he was charged with a few different counts of things, and his legal team pursued a strategy where they were really most concerned about one of the charges, which had like the biggest potential kind of sentencing attached to it. And by the end of the trial, if you look at the press conference, like when the trial's first over and you look at the press conference by him and his lawyer, they were pretty happy. They considered it a success because they did successfully avoid the biggest charges. And so they were pretty happy about it. It looks to me like the judge sentenced very, very aggressively. The judge actually went way harder than the sentencing guidelines. And I believe that was because he was pretty intransigent and rude throughout the process. He's very cocky and he's very flamboyant. And this is why people, this is why he's so notorious and why people hate him so much. Because he's cocky, and he was like that during the trial. Like he was somewhat, and if you guys have ever been to court, or if anyone listening has ever been to court, they really do look down on this kind of thing. Like they want you to show up on time, wear a suit, look scared, be respectful. They really expect you to have that kind of attitude. And so if you're like, kind of laughing at them and that kind of thing, like the judges, they really do get personally offended by that kind of thing. And so it looks like the judge just went extra hard on the few counts that he was found guilty of. even beyond the sentencing guidelines. And the final thing I'll say about the case that is important for people to know when you're kind of like really thinking about this guy is that it's a victimless crime. No one got hurt. Like all of his investors made their money back and then some. Like there's no one who got like ripped off or whatever. The actual charges were like securities fraud or something like that, or and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. But like there's not a single party in any of it who like got hurt in any way. And so it's a very I think it's a very political case, and I think the reason he ended up in jail was very political, because even after the trial was over and the verdicts were handed out, he thought he was fine. He thought he was like pretty good. And there was not much possibility seen of him actually going to jail for that long. So that's my read on it.
How long did he get?
7 years.
7. Okay. He's been in there like...
I think he'll get some time, you know, they usually get out a little early or whatever. I believe he's due to get out like within a year or two, I think is what people say.
Are you going to try get him on Other Life?
Definitely, if I can get him, for sure.
That would be great.
Can you think of anything that he said that stuck with you as wise or insightful, or anything that you can just kind of bring to the Idea Market listeners who have not, you know, gone to the school of Martin Shkreli, myself included?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things you get from watching all these clips of his past live streams is that he actually was, you know, he people would call him and ask him all kinds of things, and he was very generous with his thoughts and advice and how he sees like all different types of topics. And you know, I think what I really like about him and admire about him and respect about him that just doesn't get communicated in the public image is that he really represents, like, if you can find obscure truths in the world, that these obscure truths that are hard to get, that most people don't want to put the work into getting, that most people don't want to educate themselves sufficiently to be able to get. But if you can put in that work and you can do that and you can actually access obscure truths in the world that are real truths, that is a kind of extraordinary economic power that you can build extraordinary things on top of. And, you know, in our world where everyone is postmodern, everyone thinks, you know, we live in this post-truth era where facts don't matter. You know, this is an overwhelmingly kind of popular attitude combined with a kind of general nihilism and fatalism around, you know, economic challenges. Like, you know, people feel millennials today who don't have money or weren't born into, you know, advantageous in, you know, life feel like, you know, there's nothing they can do for themselves. There's a lot of nihilism and fatalism around this, combined with a kind of skepticism towards the very existence of real truths. And it's like, this guy is a very, very badass example of how false this is, because, you know, he doesn't have any training in biology or chemistry or pharmaceuticals. He just got into this world and interested in this world through hedge fund stuff, seeing the markets and seeing how these companies, you know, kind of look from the outside, and then was like, oh, wait, okay, so you mean all I have to do is do research on biology and chemistry, and I can find companies that have drugs that other people just don't know how to improve. And I can just basically get really smart on biology and chemistry. I can figure out, and if I can figure out a tiny improvement from like this drug at its current stage, to make it a slightly better drug with a little bit of research and testing and improvement, I can make millions of dollars. And he just went, that's literally just what he did. And he just he went deep and got educated, and in a really self-motivated, independent way, and was able to build like a massive pharmaceutical company and do like really interesting work. And so I think he really kind of represents that like outsider American hustler kind of attitude where like the truth is real. And if you can get a piece of it through hard work, then you can get paid mad money, basically. And I like that. I think that's badass. I don't think we have enough, you know, kind of examples of that. And also, yeah. So I would say that's kind of what I found interesting and inspiring about kind of coming to see him from my own perspective. Yeah, I think it just made me very inspired to like, oh man, are there weird fields that I can actually like get really educated on? Like I spend months and months learning something really, really hard and challenging that no one else is just no one else is going to put in the effort. No one does that, you know? Is there something like that I'm interested in that I could get really schooled on, get obsessed with, get a real edge, and then build something crazy and badass and really high leverage? There aren't many like kind of culture, like live internet-based cultural examples of that you can kind of like follow along with, and I like that.